Good morning. Boeing's future in commercial aviation is very much in doubt, especially in the fastest growing markets in the world. COMAC will take over most of the new markets in these fast growing areas. And going forward, the market share for Chinese airlines and for China's plane maker will grow while shrinking for Boeing and for Airbus. Fortunately for Boeing, the company also makes a lot of money building planes for the Pentagon. Unfortunately for Boeing, they need raw materials and electronics and components from China to build those planes for the Pentagon, and China is cutting those off. Dual use is technology that has applications in both civilian and military sectors, and anything dual use that goes through China is basically dead. In order for companies to import China components or materials that have a dual use purpose, they need to guarantee Chinese regulators that those materials will not be sold to a third party or otherwise be used in military applications. And this is basically impossible. If a regulator in China knows that he will lose his job if he approves the sale of materials that later show up in a stealth bomber or in a hypersonic missile system, the default answer from that guy is going to be a hard no. So the markets for these materials are effectively closed. More explicitly, Boeing itself was placed on the Chinese export ban list by name, and this means that Boeing, along with these other companies here, cannot get materials they need to build weapons from China, and China is where almost all of them come from. For the rare earths export bans that have already been announced by China, they have deep and wide use in aerospace and especially in military aerospace. An aerospace company builds planes for passengers. A military aerospace company builds bombers and missiles. So these rare earth export bans from China are a serious problem for companies that build planes of all types, but the dual use export bans of rare earth metals and magnets and components are an existential threat to military aerospace contractors. Exports of magnets that are necessary for the manufacturing of drones and cars have been stopped at China's ports. These are also the magnets needed by weapons makers who build robots, missiles, and spacecraft. Boeing then, along with some others that were specifically singled out by China. These are the critical inputs for the supply chains of everything we need for the future of warfare. Those chains are shut down. China produces basically all, may as well say, of the heavy rare earth metals in the world and 90% of the world's rare earth magnets, which are much more powerful. Japan and Germany make up most of the remaining 10%, but then we run into China again. Japan and Germany need China for the raw materials to build their magnets, and we should assume that China's export ban is going to include companies in Japan and Germany that build magnets for anybody building planes and missiles. And that hypothetical regulator who just said no to Boeing is going to give the same answer to a Japanese or German company who hopes to build magnets for Boeing. And in case we're wondering how much pain this will cause here, in China, it's not very much at all. These magnets are insignificant, just a tiny share of China's overall exports. Minimal economic pain in China with big effects everywhere else. This is an analysis from the Institute for Energy Research, and they have 5 big takeaways. Number 4 is how we got here and why there's no quick fix. We cannot mine anything in the United States. We cannot set up the dirty refineries for rare earths in the United States, and we do not manufacture magnets in the United States. As a result, we are wholly dependent on others for imports for scandium and yttrium at 100%, and overall we're dependent on China for 70%. So we're decades away from having a supply chain for these raw materials and then the magnets that Boeing can use in their civilian aircraft, let alone in their military planes. This is a congressional report from November. The analysts observe here that Boeing has a lot of problems, and Boeing is losing a lot of money. Fatal crashes, safety, legal and financial troubles. The machinists went on strike, then got big pay raises. Then Boeing had to raise $25 billion to build cash. Big problems for Boeing in space and in defense, in addition to everything happening in their commercial jets division. Congress and the Pentagon realize that our defense systems are highly dependent on Boeing, and in turn, though, Boeing is highly dependent on China. Boeing is the fourth largest Pentagon contractor at over $20 billion a year. The F-15, Apaches and Chinooks, refueling tankers, as well as space. And for every single thing on this list, Boeing is dependent on China to get the parts and the materials they need. And China's just cut them off. This is a report from 2022, and it's a big list of Boeing's aerospace contracts with the Pentagon. And every project in this survey depends on a supply chain that runs through China. Most recently, Boeing won the contract for the F-47 fighter jet, the next generation air dominance future fighter jet. It has state-of-the-art stealth technology. There is nothing close to it in terms of speed, maneuverability, payload being missiles and bombs. America's enemies will never see it coming. That part is true. Nobody will see this coming because it's not coming. This plane will never be built. That big red thing is May 4th Square in Qingdao, Shandong Province. Be good.
Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you.